The movie starts with Jimmy Logan telling a story about his favorite song, John Denver's Take Me Home, Country Roads, and its importance in culture. His daughter Sadie doesn't think it will work for her upcoming pageant. He is also repairing his car with the help of Sadie. Sadie asks him if he will come to her rehearsals. He says after work, he will come by to pick her. She tells him that she had asked her mom and stepfather Moody if they could help Jimmy with his cell phone, and they replied even if they will, Jimmy will not take it from them. Jimmy says yes, and he tells her that he needs a phone only to click her photos, and asks her to pose nicely. She starts to pose and giggle. Jimmy goes through his shift in the tunnels, beneath the motor speedway, only to return from work for his boss. California Cal tells him directly that he has been laid off. He asks for the reason for his sudden layoff. Cal tells him that someone in HR has seen him limping after parking his truck. Jimmy argues that it doesn't affect his work. Cal affirms he knows that, but as he hasn't disclosed this fact at the time of hiring, boss says the company might be answerable to some problem in future. Therefore, he got to go. To make things worse, Jimmy goes to his sister Melly parlor, where he tells her that he has to go to Sadie's beauty pageant rehearsals. Melly says sarcastically, "It's good that you want to see her rehearsals, but it was yesterday." He says, "Why didn't you call me?" She says your phone was unreachable, and she is still angry with you. Jimmy goes to Sadie's house, where her mother Bobby Joe admonishes Jimmy over Melly overspeeding the car and bribing the police. Jimmy just smiles to dodge the conversation and calls Sadie. He asks Sadie to have an ice cream with him, but she denies, saying it is not allowed for her, and she might gain weight. He says you are not fat, but looking at Bobby's expression, he shuts his mouth. Meanwhile, Sadie's stepfather and stepbrothers enter the room, and they are planning to go for a movie. Sadie asks Jimmy to accompany them, but he denies, and even says the movie is quite inappropriate for kids, but Moody replies that they enjoy it a lot. Before leaving, Bobby Joe tells Jimmy that she and Moody are planning to move to Lynchburg, as Moody plans to open up a new dealership there. Jimmy says she can't do that. He will drag her to court. She says he could come by to meet his daughter in Lynchburg every week. He says no, and leaves for his car. She screams from behind how he is going to arrange the money for a lawyer. Jimmy goes to the Duct Tape Grill and Bar, where his brother, Clyde, works as a bartender. Clyde, a war veteran who lost part of his arm in a tour in Iraq, believes the Logan family is cursed. A NASCAR team owner, Max Chilblain, enters the bar with two friends, and makes fun of Clyde's disability. He jokes that if you put the Logan boys together, you get a whole person. He asks Clyde to make a drink for him. Clyde makes the drink. He asks him to make the drink again so that he could film it, and his followers will make Clyde famous. Jimmy can't stand someone making fun of his brother, and starts beating him, but as Max is with some boys, they grab Jimmy, and start hitting him. Clyde grabs a bottle from the bar, and heads outside to set Max's car on fire. Max and his friends run outside to see the car burning, and Max asks his boys to film the burning car as evidence, but as they start to film the scene, Jimmy comes by, grabs their phones, and throws them into the fire, then turns to Clyde and says cauliflower. The next day, Clyde wakes up with Jimmy making breakfast for him. He doubts, and says that the last time you had said cauliflower to me, I was in jail for 6 months. Jimmy says you had committed a crime, you were only supposed to keep an eye. Clyde says, being your younger brother, I was your responsibility, and now I've left my crime world behind. Since you have made the perfect bread and breakfast, as I like, I am with you. Jimmy smiles, and tells Clyde his plan to rob the Speedway, by exploiting his knowledge of the underground pneumatic tube system, used to move the Speedway's vast amount of money. For the robbery, breaking the locker is needed, and the only name that comes in Clyde and Jimmy's mind is of an incarcerated safecracker, Joe Bang, who is in jail right now. First he denies to be in their plan, as he already has enough money to start his life after finishing the term in jail. But Clyde and Jimmy tell him that his money was stolen by Mishti, his brother's wife. No money is left for him. He again reminds them that he is in jail right now, how could he break the locker? But Jimmy and Clyde assure him to not worry about that. On Joe's suggestion and demand, Clyde and Jimmy go to his dim-witted brothers, Sam and Fish. They both are playing bizarre games in a fair. Jimmy becomes suspicious regarding taking them in plan, and asks Clyde to tell them only what is necessary to tell. Joe's brothers go to meet him in prison. He asks them to get an important package from Mr. Bear in Wood. The brothers approach center screen from the right, and from the left a man dressed as a bear. They meet in the middle, where the bear hands over the package. Before they all turn, he disappears from the screen. Clyde gets himself intentionally sent to prison, by crashing into a shop, for 90 days. Millie also becomes part of their plan. The plan is to break Joe and Clyde out of prison for the robbery, and return them to prison later in the day. Jimmy takes Sadie for the tanning process, and gets her ready for her next Rihanna's performance. He takes her to Millie Parlor, where Millie asks Sadie if she is excited and she affirms. Jimmy waits outside the parlor when his old schoolmate Sylvia catches up with him. She is a health worker working in a mobile clinic, and tells him to get a free tetanus shot. He doesn't recall her at first, but when she tells him about Bobby Joe, he recalls her by asking if they have kissed in school. She drives away, saying no one has ever been this meaningless to her. Later, Millie asks Jimmy about a backup plan, and he tells her to do as told, and other things he will manage. And she agrees. Joe recruits an inmate to orchestrate a riot on the day of the robbery as a distraction. With the help of a woman working in the vault, Melly, Sam and Fish infest the Speedway's tube system with painted cockroaches, to determine which tubes go to the vault. Jimmy bumps into Cal, who wants to make sure there are no hard feelings. Cal also mentions that they finished construction ahead of schedule, meaning the heist must get moved up a week, during a big race on Memorial Day weekend. On the day of the robbery, the inmate recruited by Joe starts a fight, which results in a riot that hides Joe's and Clyde's escape. They crawl out through the vents, and are met by Melly in a Ford Shelby GT 350, which they borrowed from Moody, who picks them up and takes them to the Speedway. Warden Burns is forced to handle the situation, despite there being no actual problem, other than 2 prisoners escaping. At the Speedway, Sam and Fish blow up a generator to disable the credit card machines, forcing vendors to accept cash only. Clyde, Jimmy and Joe enter the tube room, and Joe uses an explosive improvised from bleach, gummy bears, and a dietary salt substitute, to blow open the gate from the tube to the vault. They connect the tube to a giant vacuum pump, and suck up all the cash into garbage bags. The smoke goes through the pipes, and is noticed by the Speedway staff. Security goes to investigate, but are thrown off. When others speak, they don't hear anything or smell anything. The gang then continues with taking the money through a vacuum. Jimmy tries to speed up the process, which only sends money flying everywhere. He hits the reverse button, causing the vacuum to suck up Clyde's arm. Things get heated when it slipped that Jimmy was the one originally supposed to go to Iraq, but he somehow made it so that Clyde would end up going. The gang takes the money in garbage bags and slips out. Clyde and Joe are spotted by Max, and his sponsored driver Dayton White. Another altercation occurs, in which Max gets a broken nose. The two return to prison with nobody having suspected a thing. Jimmy makes it on time for Sadie's next pageant. Instead of performing Rihanna's Umbrella like she planned, she sings Take Me Home, Country Roads as soon as she sees Jimmy walk in, leading the whole audience to sing along. It is later heard on the news that the money stolen from the Speedway was recovered by authorities after Jimmy left the truck at a gas station and tipped them off for them to find it. Melly doesn't want to see Jimmy when she hears the news. FBI agent Sarah Grayson investigates the heist. She suspects Jimmy, Clyde and Joe, but she has no evidence. Although Max claims he saw Clyde at the Speedway, his disgruntled race car driver, who wrecked due to a sugar crash caused by Max's energy drink, tells the FBI that he was not with Max at the time, and has no idea what he's talking about. The prison warden refuses to report the riot, claiming there was a small kitchen fire at the prison on that day and nothing more. After 6 months, the Speedway president receives an insurance payout, and is satisfied. The case is officially closed. When Joe returns home after being released from prison, he finds a garbage bag full of money buried in his yard. Sylvia receives an anonymous donation for her clinic, the inmate who started the riot receives an envelope stuffed with cash, and the unwitting vault employee receives a cake box full of cash. Jimmy, with Clyde and Melly's help, filled another set of trash bags with cash during the heist, and hid them at the dump to retrieve later. This explains everything happening. Jimmy determined the coast was clear once his phone service was cut off. He figured the phone company wouldn't cut his service, so long as the FBI wanted to tap his line. Jimmy and Clyde then went to retrieve the money. A while later, Jimmy goes to the bar with his new girlfriend, Sylvia. He tells Clyde, who now has a new prosthetic arm, that he split up the money for the gang, as well as for the authorities to find, to throw them off their trail. Clyde then serves Grayson, who is continuing her investigation undercover. The rest of the gang drink among each other. We see Clyde's old arm clutching a beer bottle, and Jimmy now works at a Lowe's store, near his daughter and ex-wife's home in Lynchburg, Virginia.